because it takes a while for people to show up online anyway. Hey everyone. Yeah, I know you guys don't normally see me on camera, which is okay. As some of you are aware, today or this evening, doing a talk. It was supposed to be a talk and discussion, realizing that there are a lot of people who aren't able to attend in person today. The talk and discussion is Fascism in Upstate New York, a discussion and talk. Right now, if anyone is watching and is headed down here, we're at 134 West 39th Street, the second floor, just come on up. But for those of you, the idea for this discussion came from Joanne Farrell, who is in upstate New York, and over the last year has been doing a lot of travel throughout upstate New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts, the surrounding areas. And the talk is based on her observations of fascism, the climate of fascism that exists in the upstate region of New York. She's here with me today, and we're going to be transferring over to that. And she's going to be giving you a little history, a little background, and then also discuss some ideas about what's going on presently and possible options of what people can do towards the future, especially with the elections coming up, which are so relevant and important. So let me go ahead and switch over to Joanne. And Joanne, go ahead and say hi.
Okay. Hello, good evening. Yes, I'm Joanne. I live in Rensselaer, New York, in upstate. And I wanted to come here and speak to New Yorkers about what I'm seeing in other places of the state. And also, as Mark already pointed out, I've been to Connecticut, I've been to Vermont, Massachusetts, as well as the Adirondack region, Western New York, and Rensselaer and Columbia counties. I've also traveled through the Catskill areas. And I reach out and I try to engage with people in each one of these places and try to get a feel of where their head's at. The first thing I mention is that my husband and our kids are all grown up, so these started out as just excursions, having a good time. But I'm an activist every day. I've been an activist since I was in high school and worked on many different things. This is, to me, the most important thing that I've ever worked at. So, as we travel around, I try to engage with people. And I take the time to go over at a coffee shop. If I see men that are construction workers sitting there talking, if they get political, I sit right down in the middle of them and try to engage and get things started. Some people might not hear what I've heard because they're not really baiting people and trying to engage with them as I am. And I also want to mention that speaking about fascism in America is really a tricky topic. It's really hard to get people engaged because if you speak to people of color about oppression, they're like, yeah, well, I just had my relative shot by the cops. He's in the hospital right now. We know all about oppression. And they do. And I don't want to devalue that by showing what fascism is, because fascism is still different. And if I'm speaking to Native Americans, being part of the anti-fracking movement and knowing people in that movement that are part Native American, have Native American ancestry, it's the same story. They say, oh, you want to talk to me about genocide? Well, we know all about it. We had all of our ancestors killed from the Atlantic to the Pacific over the course of 400 years. So I don't want to devalue that either. It's very important to acknowledge that right from the start. But again, fascism is different. The difference is simply the time frame. if we were going to discuss how Hitler took over Europe, when he invaded, say, Yugoslavia and Greece, he invaded those two countries and took them over in 17 days. That's a little different than the course of hundreds of years. And fascism can dwell for many, many decades. If someone's going to ask me how it started in Germany, I would bring up the 48ers. And that was Germans who were breaking away from the conservative movement at that time, and there were riots in Berlin, and we're talking back in 1848. After this period, fascism continued to grow, and Germany took a different course than most of the other countries in Europe. And to give you a little history on that, in the 1800s, Europe was breaking away from kingdoms and monarchs. And most of them were gathering all their people together, uniting in solidarity with other small villages to create one French state, one Italian state, one Dutch state, things like that. Well, Germany took a different course. Instead of going more liberal, they went conservative. And what they tried to do was consolidate their people and propel their people as these, in a conservative manner that became quite dangerous. And they didn't go into democracy. They had a liberal, they didn't have a liberal democracy. I mean, they had a conservative democracy. Instead of having just straight up free elections, they had a parliamentary democracy. That's quite different. Then you vote for a leader who, that represents you, and these representatives vote for the leader. And is voting important? Well, Hitler won by one vote in that parliamentary democracy. Keep that in mind. And, you know, I also wanted to talk a little bit more about exactly how fascism works. And I think the best way to describe it is to show you this diagram. This is a triangle. Now, we're used to oppression being sort of like a tower, where you have these leaders and monarchs on the top, and it filters down, and the people on the bottom can be crushed and have very difficult lives. Fascism is a different system. It's still oppression, it's still wicked, but it's a different system. It works in a way of a triangle. As you can see this, at the top of the triangle, you have these oblivious class. This class of people that never associate with people on the bottom. They don't want to see them, they want to live in gated villages, gated towns. They don't want to associate with them. The only purpose that people have on the bottom is to support them. They remain to themselves, they're isolated, and they choose to be isolated. And usually, in this isolation, they propel a leader on their own. They propel this leader, usually it's a nobody, somebody that has no experience, somebody that's out of the game, you know, the Oliver Cromwell or the Trump, somebody that really isn't qualified to be a leader of anything. And they propel this leader because that leader tells them what they want to hear. And what they want to hear is nothing. I don't want to be involved. There's an excuse for the oppression. There's an excuse for the violence. Whatever happens, we don't see it. We don't want to know. We keep in our communities and we keep control of the money of this nation. Now, this class, the oblivious class, divides the rest into two parts. A military class and a slave class. And the way that that works is they keep pushing supernationalism and try to build this loyal military that's going to protect the nation, but they really don't care about the nation at all. They are referring to them. They see themselves as the nation. The military class is only supposed to protect them, defend them, take orders from them. And because there's no oversight, they can order the military to attack the slave class and the working class at any given moment. And nobody would stop them, and these things can become very, very vicious because there's no real army, they're just a gang. They operate as a gang. And I wanted to describe how that worked in World War II. If I was to give you two historical examples of this, I would say when the Nazis invaded Russia, how wicked can this be? Well, when they invaded the Jewish townships and villages in Western Russia, they were given orders to kill the children, save bullets. So they killed these children by grabbing them by the head of their hair and smacking their heads into the sidewalk until they killed all the kids. And I kid you not, these are things that are well documented. One of the documentations is that Nazis used to film it. They had home movies. So they would film these atrocities as if they were badges of honor instead of, what they really did. And what they really did was incriminate themselves and give us documentation for historical purposes. They didn't know and realize they were doing that. Hitler drafted everyone from 16 to 65. So a lot of the extreme violence that took place was by very young men, all showing off in front of each other. Now, the other historical event I thought makes a point to differentiate it from other forms of oppression is when they invaded Austria. When the Nazis went into Austria, they went into a government building, this long rectangular building with a tower in the middle, and they were told to kill the children as well. So they took hundreds of children up into the tower of this government building, and in the tower, they threw them out the window and killed them. So that gives you just a brief, hardcore reality of what fascism is. Now I want to talk about upstate New York. And I wanted to say some recent events. Now in Guilderland, recently, within the last few weeks, a group of kids came into Guilderland High School in blackface in front of parents at a football game, humiliating the people of color who go to that school. And I think that was a very painful situation for them. And I see signs of these things because I know from history they have happened before. And I wanted to tell you that there's 97 groups, mostly fascist right-wing groups, other terrorist groups, that the United States government has identified as a threat to the United States and a threat to us. I believe there's a few more that they might not know about, smaller groups, but my vision of fascism is not just those groups. It's like when I met this woman on the bus, and she gets on the bus, she's a grandmother, and she has her granddaughter with her, and she has her granddaughter's wearing a t-shirt that has the Jesus and the lion, and these fascist symbols that have become popular these days, and the cobra, and it says strike first, strike hard on her sweatshirt, actually. And she gets on the bus. And so when I think about the 97 groups or more, I would say maybe even 200 to 300, if you include some of the smaller groups. None of these people, in and of themselves, are a threat to the United States. I don't think they have enough people. I think they inflate their numbers, and they inflate their value to people. The one you really have to worry about is that woman on the bus, because she doesn't have inflated numbers. She's very numerous, and there's lots of people like her. She's the woman at church serving tea. She's the one coaching soccer or volunteering for the kids' after-school program. She is numerous, and she is the one who's donating to these groups. She is the one who's writing a check. And I wanted just to give you a little background about the one group, Creativity Alliance, who teaches all about how white folks are the only architects, the only writers, all these things, they never had heard of Mesoamerica or any of the other cultures, around the world in India or Southeast Asia, that were so highly developed. And this is ludicrous. It's inaccurate information. And they give scholarships to children who write essays for them. So these are the kind of people that woman on the bus goes to. And that I find very, very disturbing. Now, I wanted to talk about, because I spoke to so many people over a course of a few years and a lot of people within last year. Instead of saying this one said this here, this one said this there, I see a correlation between what all of these people are saying. And obviously they're communicating on the internet and by email servers and on email lists. They're communicating with each other. So you could have someone out by Gilboa Dam speaking the same hatred as someone in, say, northern Rensselaer County. And they don't know each other. They live hundreds of miles away from each other, or even in Bennington. And yet they're speaking this hate because they're communicating with each other, and it's become fashionable in their culture. So I decided tonight to break it up into categories. And the first category I was going to talk about is homeless. So what are these people saying when they're speaking about the homeless? Well, the one thing they always bring up is Oakland. And it doesn't matter where you are, if you engage with them and you really pick their brain and start a political conversation, it always goes the same way. And when they speak about homeless, they say things like, well, I think we should go into Chicago, or I think we should go into Oakland and surround this place. Get the military involved, the National Guard. We should surround these people. And I was like, well, what do you mean, surround them? And they'll say, shoot them in the head. They're worthless. They have no purpose in life. Put them out of their misery. And I think that is unthinkable and disgusting. Now, my next category that I want to address is what they say about people of color. And they talk about, a good example of this would be this. I was in this one thrift store, and it is in Rensselaer County, near West Salem Lake. And it's a place close by to the capital region that I have been to many times. We were kids, we always go out there swimming. We played with those kids, we grew up with those kids. I did not see West Salem Lake as strangers. We used to go to Crystal Lake all the time, which is in the vicinity of that area. And we hung out with kids every summer. So when I hear these things this close to home, I find it really shocking. So I'm in this thrift store, and these men start talking about Albany, New York. And one man says, yeah, there's 800,000 people in Albany, New York now. And I'm like, this guy's crazy. And so someone else says, no, you're wrong. And I'm thinking, of course, he's definitely wrong. And then the other man goes, no, it's more like 1 million now. And I notice everybody in the store is kind of like listening, and they're going along with it. And I said, it's ludicrous. I mean, I was born in Albany, New York. If you haven't been to Albany, New York, let me explain to you. We're surrounded by townships and a river. Albany hasn't built up in 400 years because there's no land to build up on. They have ordinances by the city where they can't have children in high-rise apartments, so we don't have developers coming in here and building high-rises. So they can't build out, and they can't build up. There wouldn't be 800,000 or 1 million people in Upstate New York if you stood them up shoulder to shoulder. As Mark would tell you, it's a very, very small place. And it's absurd and ridiculous. So I start saying sarcastic things to the men. Oh, well, do they live underground? Because that's completely ludicrous and impossible. And they say, oh, no, you're just going by the census. You're not accounting for all the illegals. And I'm like, there's not, 900,000 illegals in Albany, New York. This is insane. And so I start getting pissed. So we engage in an argument. And then I noticed, no one in the store, there was a lot of people in the store at the time. I'd say 25 to 27 people in the store at the time. And no one defending me. Everyone kind of going along with these men. Even the cashiers from the church that ran this place were going along with it. And it's shocking. And then they also said, one of these days, we're going to surround that place. We're going to go into the black community and we're going to surround those neighborhoods full of drugs. It's about time. And we're going to arrest everybody. And, like, no white people do drugs? Like, really? You're really this ignorant that you think only black people do drugs? And it's infuriating to listen to. But because I started seeing that this is so important, I really go out of my way now to engage, bait them, and document what they're saying, because people need to know how bad it is getting. And since Trump, it has got so much worse than I've ever seen. I've lived in upstate New York most of my life, and I can't believe the things that I'm hearing. It used to be some people in the very far reaches of rural communities or down south in Alabama, Mississippi, in 1950 talked like this, or maybe the 20s. But in my own county, in my own area, it's shocking. So now I wanted to move on to women. So what are these people talking about when they speak about women? And it's pretty gruesome. They believe, first of all, that there's hundreds of millions of women on welfare. I don't think they do a census count of how many people live in the United States. They're really confused on numbers. But they believe all these women, there's all these women today, none of them are working, they're all on welfare, they all have 1 million kids, they all have abortions at 9 months. Well, I thought you just said they had all these kids, now they're supposedly aborting them. And what's really disturbing is when they say things like, well, when Trump was taking the kids away from mothers at the border, we think you should do this to all these women on welfare who are living off the system. Let's round these women up and let's take their kids away. And then so I said, what are you going to do with the kids? And they'll say things like, we're going to raise them. And I said, what are you going to do with the women? And they say things like, throw them under a bridge somewhere, and they call them all kinds of filthy names and skanks and these women on welfare. I married my current husband at 29 years old. I was a single mom for 10 years. I worked my ass off, and I wasn't on welfare, but I did get, assistance at times, like food stamps, things like that, went to a food pantry. I know how hard it is for these women. And I find the things that they say about women extremely repulsive. Now, I want to mention one more incident specifically that kind of says it all. And this also relates to women. They have this belief that women on welfare are getting a tax rebate check, that they can file an income tax check and they get a $5,000 refund. And it's completely inaccurate. No, you cannot get, you cannot file an income tax return unless you have income. But they've been lied to all their lives. And they believe that women are getting money from the government, they're getting these tax refunds when they don't work. And I can assure you, it's horseshit. Complete and utter horseshit. So I was out in Corinth. Corinth is a really nice place. They have a beach there, and it's on the Hudson River up above a dam and hydroelectric plant. The water's really clean, and the beach is free, and it's right on the Hudson River, so it's a really fun place to go. And while I was there, I met a woman, and this time she engaged with me. And she comes off very soft, like the woman on the bus, okay? Oh, you have to, come up here more often. If you want to buy a house up here, I know a realtor that can help you. And she comes off very soft and wants to engage with me. So I let her ramble on. She gets on the topic of abortion and how horrible it is. And then she tells me, you should come over for tea sometime. You know, my husband collects a lot of guns. Don't let that scare you. And, you know, so I started like, okay, here's another jerk. Let me pick her brain and see where her head's at. And we ended up having words. And, but she continues to be nice and polite. She explains to me that, well, he stockpiling guns for when people are going to take over. And what people? What people? There's no people that are going to take over America. The whole entire world ganged up on us. They could you know, overpower the United States. We have the most powerful military in the planet. So she says to me, oh, when, you know, all the minorities become more numerous than us. And she explains that they have this great fear of black people invading their neighborhoods because they will become minorities. And no matter how much you try to explain to these people, people are mixed. They need to understand that most of America is mixed. If they don't know it yet, let me fill you in, you're mixed. You would be what Hitler would reject. If you're following Hitler's philosophy and you're an American, keep in mind that he thought Americans were mixed months. And he, you know, wouldn't see mixed Irish, mixed Catholics, mixed Italians, mixed Jewish, all the other races mixed together. He would not see that as Aryan race. So to follow Hitler's philosophy is insanity. But she also talked about women and how they need to criminalize abortion, and these women should be arrested and prosecuted for murder. And that goes back to the ones that were going to go into the neighborhoods and round up these women they assume are on welfare and guess at it and round them up. And then are they going to round up women who they assume had abortions and do what with them? And criminalize them and prosecute them for murder and hold them in jail. And I see concentration camps. I see people being exploited in ways that we could have never imagined took place on this soil. So I'm going to leave you with these thoughts tonight. I want you to think about, I grew up with two parents who lived through World War II. I grew up knowing about World War II. The kids today are not learning this in school, and they need to, because what you don't know can happen again. And I think if we had a 100% Republican Congress, a Republican president, all Republican governors and state legislators, that they would round black people up, LGBTQ, women, women. Their hate towards women they express is disgusting. And I think these things can grow. And to end this conversation, never forget that I said this to you. They took, the German Nazis took over Yugoslavia and Greece in 17 days. Think about that. If we give these people power, they could take over Florida and Georgia in 17 days, or maybe New York and New Jersey in 17 days. And this is not something we can allow to happen, ever. So we have to get the word out that these people are out there and they're talking like that, and they need to be put in check before it gets out of hand. Because if you think what happened in the Trump years is the worst, it's not. You know, it could be much worse. So I thank you so much for listening. And I want everyone to do their part in getting this word out and spreading this information as much as you can. And I thank you so much for listening.
So, question. So, basically, from what you were saying, these are your observations from your interactions with people, not just in upstate New York, but Vermont, Connecticut, the surrounding area, surrounding state. And it's observations from the ground as basic. I was letting people know from just normal conversations that go on every single day between people sitting at a diner, sitting at a gas station or whatever, or just on their front porches. And I know one of the things that you were most concerned about, and the reason why you wanted to do this had to do with the upcoming elections, because specifically wanted to do this talk as a way to reach people and get their minds working on how what happened in the past in history in Germany and Austria and other places when fascist regimes took power, that, it's not enough for people to just say, oh, I could see fascist elements under the Trump administration and that stuff was coming up. But you have elections that are going on right now. Granted, it's not the presidential elections, but it's for state positions as well as governors. And that basically you're putting this out there because you want people to start thinking about this before Election Day and to take action and not just sit on the sidelines and do nothing. Is that pretty much the reason why?
Yes, it has a lot to do with it. And when it comes to New York State, which is what I try to focus on the most, because a lot of the places that I've traveled to are right in our own state. And it's hard to believe that in Democrat New York, that this is going on and that people are speaking like this so close to home. And it's really scary. I want to keep everyone to keep in mind that Zeldin sat in 2020 in the height of the pandemic before there was any vaccines yet. He sat in VIP with Trump's family at the Trump rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma, with no mask, denying that there was COVID, speaking out for Trump at that time. So if you think he's not affiliated with that, he is. And they're pushing this hate and fear of people in the urban areas, and with all their commercials. And I don't know if you've been watching their commercials in upstate New York, they're all focused on crime constantly. And they're all focused on inner city crime and the threat that all the people in the urban areas pose on the rest of civilized Americans. In this ludicrous thinking of only one group does drugs and only one group does crime. It's inaccurate information.
Oh, well, yeah, I agree. I mean...
and I have to say this one more thing, too, is, first of all, the people who are running for Congress that are using this tactic and using this theme, they're not going to vote on New York State laws when they go to United States Congress. They're going to work on federal legislation. They're going to vote on abortion laws. They're not even going to work on bill reform. It's not something that a congressman does. They don't change New York State laws. If they want to do that, they need to run for New York State legislature.
Well, it's one of the things about during election season. It is serious manipulation. I mean, as a lot of you know, I don't. I have issues with the party system, period. But I know that both parties, when it's election season, start playing on the fears of the voters. And one of the big fears that the Republican Party has been pushing in a lot of the local and state elections has to do with crime. And they always use New York City, New York State, but they use that in their ads. And as Ms. Farrell was stating, when if they're from another state, especially, or if they're U.S. congressman, senator, they're not working on state legislation or state laws or regulations. They're not working on New York City laws. They had no real power related to Rikers. I mean, they can bring attention to what's going on, but the final say is going to be here with whoever the governor is, with the local assemblies, the state senate, and stuff like that. So that's why it's important, and not just in New York, but that's why it's important for people to actually get out there and take action, and not just vote. Look at the people that are running, look at their history, their voting record, their statements they've made over time, and to get a broader picture. Don't just follow and vote for someone just because a specific just because your parents voted for them or voted for a specific party, just because they happen to be a woman or a man. It shouldn't make a difference.
Happen to be a woman is really important right now. Upstate, we have Paul Tonko. Paul Tonko has been a very strong leader on environmental issues, about women's rights, and I vote for who I think is doing a good job. And he is someone that I think is doing a marvelous job. He represents my values to the best of his ability. It doesn't mean everything gets passed in Congress, but at least he's a representative for me. The woman running against him is, using the pink card as much as she can. And people really need to know who this person is. She is the author of A Christian Guide to Voting. Just think about that, what that says if you're Jewish, what that says to Islamic Americans, Native Americans, Asian Americans, that they're not welcome here. You have to only be a Christian guide for making decisions for everyone else. And that's the kind of person that's running against him. All her ads are about crime in New York and how she's going to change bail reform. And she's not going to be able to do that from Congress. She can vote on the abortion law and be one more vote against codifying Roe v. Wade.
Okay. I want to thank you for your time. It is important. Anyone watching that did watch or is watching in the future, definitely take a listen. Share it out. Feel free to, send any comments you may have. And as always, I have a tendency not to censor comments. So I'm pretty sure because of the hashtags in there, I'll get comments from both sides. Yeah. It will take a lot for me to block someone just because they try and respect it. And it's better to even know who those people are that, have serious issues with the stuff going on. And if they're being honest, and that's their real opinion, I respect it. I don't agree with it, but I'll at least respect that they're being honest about how they're feeling. I don't believe in censorship of feelings or opinions. As long as there's no violence or anything else involved, feel free. You have a right and no one should prevent that. Again, this was Joanne Farrell having a discussion, brief history on fascism, as well as fascism in upstate New York, surrounding areas.
And we are live in New York City this evening.
So thank you, everyone. And just a heads up, there will probably be more information related to this from her as well as from myself coming up in the future. And look forward to a number of other discussions, talks, and meetings taking place over the next month. So solidarity forever. See you guys out on the front lines, and let's make a difference.